A legacy sequel, as defined by Wikipedia, is a work that follows the continuity of the original works, but takes place much further along the timeline, often focusing on new characters with the elderly original characters still present in the plot, often made many years after the original works were made. And ever since the massive success of Star Wars The Force Awakens in 2015, they just keep on being released since. Basically, every big movie franchise has received a legacy sequel if they're old enough. From Star Wars and Indiana Jones to other films like Toy Story and Jurassic Park. It's not just massive billion-dollar IPs that receive legacy sequels. Standalone films like Gladiator, Borat, and Finding Nemo have received sequels decades later as well. Many of them are terrible, but there are a select few that succeed at this. Specifically, there are 4 legacy sequels that excel at what they do, and in this video, I'll explain why these are the 4 quintessential legacy sequels in both film and television, and what makes a good legacy sequel as well. So with that said, let's just dive straight into things. But first, a quick history of legacy sequels. Unlike now, where legacy sequels are seen as cheap cash grabs that bank on people's nostalgia, legacy sequels from the 80s and 90s didn't focus on that. Classic films from the 60s and 70s, like Psycho, The Hustler, and Chinatown, received sequels decades later, but focused more on the original protagonists from the original films in new settings, or returning to established locations, but have to deal with the hardships from the original films and don't feel like a heartfelt reunion, but more of a bleak continuation. Many times these films had practically no one from the original cast returning other than the leads, and have no fan service whatsoever. The beginning of this century brought more and more of these sequels as many franchises had been established in the 80s, seeing films like Rocky Balboa and Tron Legacy being released that focus more on the tropes you expect from these types of films. Legacy sequels were coming out, but the massive success of The Force Awakens really changed things, grossing over $2 billion and now being the 6th highest grossing film of all time. The Force Awakens showed how much money could be made off of existing franchises, even if the quality of the film itself isn't the best. So now, for the past decade, no matter the genre, whether horror, action, sports, comedy, or sci fi, throughout the years we've seen sequels to practically every franchise that was at one point possible. The past 2 years, we've seen legacy sequels to Gladiator, Beetlejuice, Twister, Freaky Friday, 28 Days Later, Final Destination, The Karate Kid, Happy Gilmore, and more, most of which receiving mixed reviews. Fans either loving or hating these follow ups. But now, with that brief history out of the way, let's talk about these 4 sequels, and why they are so beloved and can stand on their own. Top Gun Maverick was the follow up to the 1986 film Top Gun, an action film revolving around naval aviator Maverick and his friend Goose, who are recruited into the sacred Top Gun program. The sequel follows Maverick 30 years later as he is now in charge of training the new class of Top Gun trainees, all as he has to deal with his past as well. Now, when it comes to the original Top Gun, it's not that great of a film. The effects and action is really well done, and it's nice to see Tom Cruise in his breakthrough role, but this is such a basic and forgettable story. And aside from a few scenes, it's just a popcorn blockbuster, and received pretty mixed reviews that year, despite being the highest grossing film that year. But this is where Maverick stands out from the original. The first thing that makes a legacy sequel great is focusing on creating a good film first, and a good legacy sequel second. Aside from Maverick and Iceman returning briefly, no other characters return from the original film. Instead, Jennifer Connelly appears as a character briefly mentioned in the original, and Miles Teller as Maverick's deceased colleague Goose's son Rooster, with every other character being completely original. Whether you've seen the original or not, or whether you even like the original Top Gun as well, Top Gun Maverick creates one of the funnest action films of the past few years, and creates a deeply compelling film as well. Maverick in this film is a much more developed character than in the original film, having a complicated relationship with Rooster due to promising his mother he wouldn't join the Navy due to what happened with his father, and having to teach a new class of Top Gun students similar to his decades ago. Top Gun Maverick does a surprisingly amazing job of establishing its new characters and continuing the stories of familiar ones decades later, all feeling like real people and having established personalities, despite the enormous cast also consisting of John Hamm, Ed Harris, Monica Barbaro, Louis Pullman, Glenn Powell, and many others. We get to learn everything we need to about these figures, and makes the Top Gun world feel much more interesting and complex than it was previously, making you want to know about some of these characters' past and what will happen to them in the future. The action helps elevate this film as well. The original film had very good action for its time, but Maverick takes modern technology and blows it out of the water. You feel what it's like to fly jet in this film, and every single action scene is thrilling throughout. Even the slower scenes, like when Maverick's teaching or the fun environment at the bar, captivates the viewer and appeals to people of all ages, old or young. The screenwriters of the film saw what made the original Top Gun so popular and were able to adapt it into a modern era decades later, but still feels grounded despite some of the crazy things that happen. That's just one part of what it makes the Legacy sequel special, taking a film from years ago and creating a follow-up that appeals to fans of the original, while also creating new fans along with it. Many Legacy sequels disrespect the older films it's based on, resulting in older fans loathing these new films and returning back to the originals, and leaving new viewers quite confused as well. Maverick never makes fun of the original film, even though there are many opportunities to do so, instead, taking the good aspects of the original while reworking the weaker parts, resulting in a truly phenomenal film that stands out among other action slop or legacy sequels similar to it. Critics and general audiences love this film alike, being nominated for Best Picture and winning an Oscar for Best Sound, along with being the second highest grossing film of 2022, making almost $1.5 billion. Very impressive considering COVID was still around and only being outgrossed by the second Avatar film. And with a sequel in progress, it seems like the Top Gun franchise is truly about to begin. By focusing on making a great movie first, creating a legacy sequel shouldn't be that difficult when you have the framework all laid out. Blade Runner 2049 is another sequel to an 80s film, this one being the 1982 sci fi classic Blade Runner. This film stars Ryan Gosling in the lead role as a Blade Runner named K in the futuristic year of 2048, who uncovers a secret that could destroy human civilization. Harrison Ford and Edward James Olmos return from the original film, but similar to Top Gun Maverick, the rest of the cast is entirely new and builds further upon the original film. Blade Runner was a revolutionary film when it was released in the early 80s, despite underperforming at the box office, with a huge cult following. Unlike other sci fi films with very minimal story or themes, Blade Runner stood out with its themes of what it means to be human, how memories affect who we really are, and to always be cautious of the environment around us. Harrison Ford's compelling performance as Rick Deckard in the gorgeous yet bleak sci fi setting made this a true masterpiece from the 1980s. Blade Runner 2049 does a stellar job of following up this beloved film, and demonstrates the second reason about what makes these legacy sequels so special, bringing back a familiar world into a modern climate. The evolution of technology from the release of Blade Runner to the release of Blade Runner 2049 was astonishing. Every household now has more advanced technology from that time, like computers and video game consoles. iPhones have taken over the world, and the internet gives us so many things that we could never have expected. Although our world looks nothing like Blade Runner's version of Los Angeles in 2019, they could never have expected how much more we rely on technology than in the film, even though we still don't have flying cars yet. Bummer. Allowing 2049 to connect more with our chaotic society. One of the things being K being a replicant himself, hunting down his own kind. The audience and Deckard learned a lot about replicants in the original Blade Runner, and how complex and interesting they can really be. So to go through this film through the lens of a replicant themselves really opens up the door to create an interesting follow-up. The decades after Blade Runner, especially in the 2010s, showed how technology can divide us just as equally as it can connect us, with 2049 showing how loneliness can really affect us all, along with how AI can play a role in our lives. Now more than ever, AI is affecting every aspect of our lives, whether we want it or not, with joy being a visual representation of that. Like Top Gun Maverick, Blade Runner 2049 takes the technology of today and uses it to this advantage. Denis Villeneuve takes the mantle from Ridley Scott and creates a gorgeous film like no other, with the help of Roger Deakins' Oscar winning cinematography, that really brings out the bright colors in this bleak dystopian world. An amazing film despite having Jared Leto in it. Newer filmgoers now have their own Blade Runner to connect to in this new and confusing age of technology and digital media. While I prefer the original film slightly, I connected and its themes much more. I won't blame anyone for liking 2049 more, as it's one of the best science fiction films of the century, and shows why, if given the opportunity, Blade Runner could be one of the most innovative franchises in Hollywood. But just like the original, 2049 flopped at the box office, so we won't be able to see its true potential. An anime series, Blade Runner Black Lotus, was released in 2021 and 2022, with a video game, 2033 Labyrinth, and a live action miniseries, 2099, to be released soon. So this universe will continue, but I don't know if there's a film in store for the future. Harrison Ford was featured in legacy sequels for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, so it was great to see him in an actually good one. Blade Runner 2049 shows how putting existing themes into a more modern environment with contemporary topics can result in just as an amazing film as the original movie, and how if more legacy sequels would do that, maybe they wouldn't be as bad or forgettable as they are now. Now, we've talked exclusively about films so far, but what about TV shows? Sure, they aren't as prevalent as movies, but they still exist, usually to mixed or decent reception that appeal to fans of the original movies or TV shows that they are based on, like Fuller House, Star Trek Picard, That 90s Show, and Ash vs. Evil Dead. But in my opinion, one is easily the best. Cobra Kai is a martial arts show serving as a sequel to the original Karate Kid trilogy of films. Throughout the 6 seasons, we follow Johnny Lawrence, the villain of the original Karate Kid film, as he struggles in life and decides to solve his problems by reopening his Cobra Kai dojo, with bullied kid Miguel Diaz. Meanwhile, Daniel LaRusso is a successful car salesman with a family, but is soon brought back into the world of karate as his fierce rivalry with Johnny reemerges. And as new and old faces return, things just get more and more complicated as the years progress. As a TV show, Cobra Kai benefits from having tons of more time to develop its stories and casts, but could fall into the trap of other shows like decreasing in quality as more seasons come out. But that never happens to Cobra Kai, and instead we see how characters have changed decades later along with their new family and friends as well, how they deal with their problems in life, and how karate can both benefit and hurt them in the long run. The original Karate Kid is a pretty good sports story, iconic but a little too standard of a sports film, carried by its amazingly developed characters, with each sequel getting worse and worse. And that brings us to the third point about what makes a legacy sequel so special: establishing new characters and bringing back old ones, where they are equally as likable and important. A lot of legacy sequels, Star Wars sequel trilogy, bring back original characters and forget what makes these characters so iconic and relatable, making them old and bitter and nothing like the original characters we grew up with. Meanwhile, new characters are bland and underdeveloped. Since the spotlight is on the icons, it results in new characters we don't care about or often hate most of the time. That never happens with Cobra Kai though. The original Karate Kid is a very black and white story. Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are the good guys, and Johnny and Kreese are the bad guys we have to beat at the end. Cobra Kai isn't black or white though. It's a very gray series instead. We always see both sides of every story, whether it's the senseis or their students, with the characters being more and more developed with respective character arcs. You care about practically every character by the end of this show, and you've seen them grow and change throughout the years in and out of school. Some characters are obnoxious assholes at the beginning, but become confident leaders by seasons 5 and 6. Practically every living cast member with some sort of role in the OG Karate Kid trilogy returns, even from the OK Part 2 and Abysmal Part 3. Characters like Chozone and Terry Silver were interesting and unique characters that were introduced in their respective films, but brought down with painfully generic and bland stories that we could all predict from a mile away. But when they return in the later seasons, they are more mature and developed, with their own problems, and whether they become heroes or villains, the nature of the show suits them so much better than the films they were introduced in. And the original characters are just as good. Miguel, Robbie, Sam, Tori, Hawk, Dimitri, and everyone else, kid or adult, become just as interesting as the characters we've known for decades. This new generation of kids focus on everything high school kids have to deal with: tests, relationships, prom, and college. But out of school, they focus on becoming the best fighters they can and compete against each other to prove who's the strongest, just like their senseis decades prior. You truly learn to love and care about these characters throughout the 65 episode run, and show the perfect way to balance characters both old and new. Very consistent throughout its 6 season run, Cobra Kai is the best Legacy sequel show and proves that Legacy sequels can work in any format. Whether you've seen the classic it's based on or not, Cobra Kai is one of the most accessible and fun shows to watch that everyone in the family can like and enjoy. Captivating throughout, the show is a blast throughout. And if you haven't seen it already, check it out just like the rest of these projects. Characters are just as important as the story being told. They are what helps create the story after all. We've now seen a legacy sequel to the Jackie Chan Karate Kid film. That's also kind of a sequel to Cobra Kai, but fails to live up to the height of the Netflix show. With that being said, it's time to move on to our final project. Another legacy sequel based on a sports film directed by John G. Avildsen, Creed is a legacy sequel based on the Rocky franchise. Rocky already had a legacy sequel in Rocky Balboa in 2006, considered to be the end of the franchise, but Creed focuses on Adonis Creed, son of legendary boxer Apollo Creed, as he's trained by his father's former rival Rocky Balboa himself, as he trains to be a legendary boxer just like his father. Creed takes the trope of legacy sequels, a former protagonist training the new protagonist of the film, and takes it to a level we surprisingly haven't seen before. Rocky is surprisingly a very sad franchise. Starting with Rocky 3, every film featured the death of one of the original characters, starting with Mickey, Apollo in Rocky 4, Adrian before the events of Rocky Balboa, and now Paulie before the events of Creed. Rocky 5 didn't feature any deaths, but it's Rocky 5. We have bigger problems with that film. Anyways, Rocky is now all by himself in this film. A lonely old man whose close friends are now all dead, with an estranged son with nothing really left for him to live for, even welcoming death into his life. But that changes when Adonis approaches the retired boxer as his trainer, and although he isn't the best trainer in the past, he agrees to do so, and they embark on their journey. This brings me to my fourth and final point about what makes legacy sequels like these so special. Taking familiar tropes that we expect and creating a unique and organic experience. Tropes like a mentor figure are common in legacy sequels, along with old villains returning, old heroes becoming exclusive, old teams reuniting, among many others. But Creed, and the two other films in this series as well, particularly this one, take these tropes and give the best examples of them. Michael B. Jordan's and Sylvester Stallone have an amazing chemistry with one another, leading to an amazing relationship in the film as well. Creed wants to be just like the father he never met, but feels more similar to Rocky in the original 1976 film instead. He cares about his mom, Rocky, and Bianca, and aspires to be just as great of a boxer as the legends before him. But Rocky's story is just as compelling, with a career best performance from Stallone, especially after Rocky finds out he has cancer just like Adrian, and at first refuses treatment as it didn't work for his wife, and wants to join her and his other deceased friends as well. Adonis eventually persuades Rocky to go through his treatment, but you never know if Rocky will die or not, adding more emotion to the film more than any other film in the series. Although it follows a very similar story to the original Rocky film, it still feels so much more different than that film, and establishes a new branch in this franchise that can stand on its own, even without Rocky himself, as we saw with Creed 3. Creed is an amazing sports film that, although has a relatively simple premise, has so much heart and character that it rivals the original film that is based on. The mentor-trainee relationship of Rocky and Adonis is the best example of this trope, even when compared to other legacy sequels I mentioned previously or ones I haven't mentioned. Stallone and Jordan are just that good. Just because something is familiar to an audience doesn't mean we can't build upon it to create a new variant of it. Ryan Coogler and the rest of the Creed team understood what made the Rocky film so appealing and successful in the past, and how to transform that type of film to a younger audience that also appeals to fans of the originals as well. Sports films, just like legacy sequels, fall into similar traps with tropes and plot threads that we have seen before. And instead of changing that, sometimes you have to add more fresh elements to it that will make it stand out from other films in their genre. Coming out a couple months within The Force Awakens, it was a commercial hit, but only grossing around 10% of that film gross. But one is infinitely well more regarded than another. now a new franchise itself that's consistently one of the best running sports franchises right now. Top Gun Maverick, Blade Runner 2049, Cobra Kai, and Creed are easily the best legacy sequels at this moment, showing that these types of films can be critical and commercial successes, appealing to critics and general audiences, and old and new fans as well. All of these projects have extremely good ratings as well, proving this point with a few simple techniques. Focusing on making a great film first, taking old themes and recycling them into a new setting, creating new characters while honoring old characters, and revitalizing old tropes are four consistent themes I've seen throughout good legacy sequels that help them out from all of the other shitty cash grabs that help them establish legacies of their own, apart from the classic films they're all based on. Whether you love them or hate them, legacy sequels are here to stay in this film landscape, and I would rather see one that tries its best to be the best film possible while also honoring the original film. These four legacy sequels are truly special and will truly live to become iconic films in their own right. But anyways, guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching towards the end, and I hope every single one of you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, share, and especially subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I want to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and any support whatsoever would be greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much, and I'll hope to see you next time. Bye.